If your kid came home and said, I'm thinking of being an accountant or a lawyer or a salesperson, you're going to go, forget the sales, do these other ones, because people still don't appreciate it as a career with the opportunity. We have to change that attitude. And I think the only way it's going to change is we have to change the perception of what a salesperson really is. And a salesperson, at the end of the day, it's a conduit. There's somebody who is helping to solve a problem.
You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm your host, Corey, and today I'm excited to talk to John Golden. He's a renowned strategist, a best-selling author, and speaker. He is currently the Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer, Pipeliner CRM, a tech platform built to enable salespeople and managers to effectively and efficiently manage their pipeline and drive increased revenue. Now, John has spent more than a decade at the forefront of AI-driven sales tech and is passionate about aligning cutting-edge AI sales CRM with the evolving needs of the modern sales professional and revenue organization. John is also a best-selling author of books like Winning the Battle for Sales and Social Upheaval, How to Win at Social Selling. In addition, he is the publisher and executive editor of Sales Pop, where he hosts an extremely popular podcast, boasting more than 1,500 interviews with industry leaders. John, this is the part where I say, you have an impressive bio. Welcome to the show. I feel like I could have gone on for pages, right? Did I miss anything? Is there anything?
No. It just means, Corey, it just means I've been around for a long time. That's all that means.
Well, it certainly reads impressive. So welcome to the show. I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. So let's start a little bit with your journey, right? So you have a kind of a unique way into sales. You began your career as a tech writer up in Dublin in the .com era, and then eventually made your way over to Silicon Valley in the world of sales. What was that journey like, and when did you go from tech writing to really switching gears to the sales profession?
Yeah, so as you said, I started off as a technical writer in Dublin in a company that did computer-based training for, large organizations, particularly training on technical products, things like networking, Novell, if people remember Novell NetWare back in the day, and then obviously Microsoft products and other technology products. And then I was given the opportunity to move to where they were setting up a sales marketing organization in Silicon Valley, in Menlo Park, and then subsequently in Redwood City. And so then my role kind of started to transition to being more of I would say like a product marketing role, but one where I would go with our enterprise salespeople. They would contact me. I would go with them, and I would make presentations to their prospects and clients, like explaining the new offerings, because now we were bringing them out we originally used to have them on floppy drives and on CDs, then on LANs, and eventually on intranets, and then eventually on the web itself. So the delivery mechanisms were changing. So I did a lot of work then, supporting the sales folks out in the field, and helping to introduce to clients and to prospects what we were doing. And then after that, when the company merged with Skillsoft, I moved to New Horizons Computer Learning Centers, which was the franchisor of a global franchise network. Again, it was training on technical products. But my job there, and this was an interesting introduction to selling in some regard, Corey, because I'll tell you, some of the most difficult sales I've ever come across is when you think of a franchise network, like people think of, McDonald's and things like that, and they think, well, you have to sell the products that the company, that the franchisor tells you to sell. Well, that's not always the case. With New Horizons, the centers, the franchisees, they had a lot of discretion around what they chose to sell. So I had to sell products to the franchisees in order to get them to sell it to their customers. And I discovered that selling to franchisees is actually a really, really hard thing. And there was a kind of an interesting relationship between the franchisees and corporate, because you had small franchisees who kind of made the choice between, will I open a Subway, will I open a 7-Eleven or a Computer Learn? So you had other ones who owned multiple locations and were like fairly sophisticated businesses. So you were selling to very different types of people. And then after that, I joined a startup that was based out in Pennsylvania that was focused on the K-12 education space. And there I became sales and marketing, as in it was just me. And they had a development center, Western Pennsylvania, and I was based at the East Coast area. And it was a very interesting experience to sit with sit at a $20 plastic desk that you just picked up from Staples, and with your laptop and with a phone, a BlackBerry at the time in front of you, and sort of go, okay, what do I do now? And start to have to go out and prospect and build build my own sales pipeline, but also like build the marketing to go along with it. So I've been fortunate that I've always had a foot in both camps, in three camps, to be honest, in the product, the marketing, and the sales. That was an interesting experience. Then I worked at the Mortgage Bankers Association for a while, where I took over their for-profit training wing. And again, I was selling our training products to mortgage bankers, to banks, and to individuals in that industry. So again, interesting again, because when you're selling to what looks like a captive audience, you think like, oh, well, this is easy because you're selling to association members, but they're actually really hard to sell to, because they often believe that they should get things for free, or says you get things a lot cheaper, and so that could be difficult. And then I was fortunate to get the opportunity to take over Huthwaite, which was the company that it was a global sales consultancy that did spin selling, the Neil Rackham approach to selling, which had been the only scientific study ever done on sales. And there was 65,000 salespeople across multiple countries. And so, I mean, he had gone from the organization at that stage and he'd moved on. But I looked after that organization and another one called Omega Performance for the parent company Informa. But the interesting thing that I learned there, Corey, was I assumed that big, large multinational organizations, that they would have very sophisticated sales processes and sales methodology. And when I was first there and we would go into a large organization to present, say, spin selling, and I would be going, this just seems a little bit kind of basic for an organization of this size. And then I discovered, to my amazement, that the executives would be going, oh, this is great. We need this. We don't do this. We don't do that. And I'm like, you don't do this. You don't do these basic things. So I discovered that, which was one of the greatest lessons, was that unfortunately, sales doesn't get the attention it deserves. And a lot of people, and I'd say almost a majority of people, default into a sales job. A lot of people if you look, there's very few sales programs at universities, and very few people consider sales as a career. I mean, it's not when they're finishing high school or whatever. You rarely say somebody, oh, I want a career in sales. They'll go, I'm going to do marketing, or I'm going to do this. And they go to college. So you have all these people who come out of college with degrees like marketing, and then discover that for every one marketing job, there is like hundreds of sales jobs. And so they end up not being able to get that marketing job. So they default into sales. And unfortunately, oftentimes they're never kind of satisfied. They always kind of feel like they're not where they should be. They're not in a well-respected profession. So they don't always embrace it. And unfortunately, that is reinforced by organizations who don't invest in training and development, who don't give them the respect they deserve. So that was very interesting for me, is that what I discovered is that to sell effectively, it's not that complicated. And the best people, follow very, very simple guidelines. And that's how they are successful. They're successful because of their consistency and the way they adhere to a process. And what I have found over the years that, unfortunately, again, you have sales managers or sales leaders tend to be top performers who get promoted into a position, never trained to be either a manager, leader, or a coach, and then expected to increase the performance of their sales teams when reality they end up getting frustrated. And I think the statistic is something like most of them last 15 months in the job. Because they've gone from being a top performer, everything, fantastic, to frustration because they don't know how to coach, they don't know how to lead. They miss, being involved in the sale itself, at the co-face, if you like. And so, that was kind of my journey. And then I did that for a number of years. And then I did some management consulting. And then Nicholas Kimler, the founder of Pipeliner CRM, I did some projects for him. And he said, do you want to come on board and help launch Pipeliner into the US market and build up its market presence? So that's what we've been doing since. But like I said, Corey, I think what I've learned about sales over the years, that just like any other discipline, if you want to be good at it, you have to be consistent and follow some basic rules. And you have to understand the process is your friend and move away from these kind of old ideas that some people have, well, selling is an art, or you're born to be a salesperson, or I had one salesperson used to say to me, "Oh, John, I sell the sizzle, not the steak," and that kind of thing, which maybe once upon a time you could do, but not nowadays. I think people expect more, and you should expect more yourself, to be honest, because it's a fantastic role, and it's a role that's extremely important in our society today, because when people are exchanging goods and services in a way where both parties feel that it was a fair transaction and they both felt like, as we say, winning together, then that creates long-term relationship, that creates prosperity on both sides. And let's face it, what do we want in the world today? We want people to be prosperous and to have good lives. And once you have that, then you're less likely to be in conflict.
A lot to unpack there. I think we will definitely see eye to eye on a lot of the major points, especially what you brought up, John, with the fact that people have to be born sellers. Absolutely not. It is a skill that can be taught. And when you have a framework, when you have a process, it's not even about religiously kind of following that process, but it's knowing kind of where you are. And hey, if you already do something instinctually, or you've had another career where you bring a certain skill set or a certain way of handling a conversation at the table, it's also helpful to have a framework and a process where you can say, oh, that's why I'm successful when I do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So, I'm with you kind of 1,000% there. And one thing a thread I wanted to pull on real quick, because it's something we haven't gotten into this podcast in a while, is you mentioned the perception of the sales profession. And I think it's really important to think about and talk through. Now, I know our CEO is involved with the program down here at UC Boulder. We have another associate that does some things up at the University of Michigan. So it is changing, and slowly. I'm curious. So are you originally from the Dublin area?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how does that, because I've seen a little bit of a shift. There do seem to be more professional sales organizations in the UK, in Europe. Do you think the US is kind of playing catch up in that way with regards to how the sales profession is viewed?
I mean, I think to some degree, given that this is obviously a far larger market, there's far more sales professionals in the US than there are, in the combined Europe, to be perfectly honest. But as you said, we have done some work ourselves at Pipeliner with Professor Daniel Strunk at DePaul University, who run an undergrad degree in sales. But they don't just teach sales; they also teach sales technology. So they're actually, they teach CRM. They actually use Pipeliner and that. But they're actually teaching the next generation of salespeople, and they do projects. They do sales projects with external companies. So really actually preparing almost fully trained salespeople, professional salespeople to go into the field. There are some other universities and colleges that are doing programs like this, but I do think it's still slower than it should be, because I think, unfortunately, there still is that pervasive attitude where people still see salespeople as the Glengarry, Glen Ross type, or the always be closing, or the used car salesperson. And not to denigrate used car salespeople, because there's some fantastic ones there, but the stereotype, if you like, of that. And I still think, and this is where I think the attitude has to change, Corey, because at the end of the day, it's like most people, if your kid, came home and said, I'm thinking of being an accountant or, lawyer or a salesperson. Yeah, you're going to go, oh, forget the sales, like do these other ones, because people still don't appreciate it as a career with the opportunity. And at the end of the day, you could actually end up being far more successful, making a lot more money as a salesperson than maybe you could in the other roles. So I think we have to change that attitude. And I think the only way it's going to change is we have to change the perception of what a salesperson really is. And a salesperson at the end of the day it's a conduit. There's somebody who is helping to solve a problem, right? They're helping to bring a good or a service or whatever to somebody who can use that to improve, if it's B2B sales, improve their business, their opportunities, or solve problems that they have in order to help their business. So it's a really wonderful role, if you like. If you think it's that tip of the spear, it's the one who's introducing you to something that can make a difference to you and hopefully build and expand that relationship over time. And I think it's such a great career for people who are curious. I think you need curiosity, because you need nowadays, the days of the kind of salesperson, as I said, the other one with the sizzle and the steak is, getting away without understanding business or the business of business or the business of your prospect or customer. Those days are gone. I think you need that insatiable curiosity, and you have to have that business acumen. And so I think there's that. If you're a problem solver, because at the end of the day, oftentimes a salesperson's a problem solver. You have an issue. Maybe you don't even understand what the issue is that you have or the opportunity that you have. And by working and talking with an experienced salesperson who can say, yeah, I understand what you're trying to do. We've done something similar with these other customers. Let me look at that and then talk you through, or we could possibly do this. And so I think the curiosity, your problem solver, the relationship aspect, and people always mistake that when you say the relational aspect. They think you have to be that guy who's going, hey, Corey, hey, kids, and all that. I mean, the relationship can be built on the fact that I'm consistent, I help you, I do what I say, and you trust me. We may never have that casual side of like chatting about kids or golf or whatever, but yet we have a very powerful relationship because it's built on trust, right? And it's built on consistency, and it's built on the fact that I deliver for you, and we always come to a good deal at the end of the day that both of us are happy with. So I think it's such a great profession. And but it needs to have that investment. It needs organizations to invest in it. They need to invest in the training. They need to invest in development. And salespeople themselves, quite frankly, if your organization is not going to do that for you, you need to do it for yourself. Because at the end of the day, as you know, Corey, nobody cares about our careers or our circumstances as much as we do.
Yeah, exactly. I was struck when you mentioned, John, being a conduit. Because I'm thinking, it's something that no one really thinks about, right? Until there's a break in it, right? Until you get water in the line, so something goes horribly wrong, you don't really see the value of it. And I think this is kind of circling how we're talking about the sales profession. And at the same time, it seems like to be an effective conduit, you have to really almost sort of embed yourself in a client organization, right? You have to bring that understanding, that curiosity, and show up and say, hey, I may not know it all. Let me know where I get it wrong, but I've done my prep. Here's what I think is going on. So how vital is that phase, that pre-meeting phase, that preparation, that getting to know the company before you have that initial conversation?
Yeah, I think the preparation is so hugely important. And I would say it starts even how you start your day, to be perfectly honest, especially if you're in sales, you're going to face a lot of no's, rejections. And nowadays, somebody asked me yesterday, did I have a solution for people, what are some strategies when you get ghosted by somebody? And I was saying, if I had that solution, I wouldn't be doing this. I'd be selling that, because that's unfortunately, there's not really a good answer to that. So you obviously have a lot of perceived negatives, right? Rejections, getting ghosted, or we've all been in that situation where maybe you had a deal that was about to be signed and then something at the organization changed at the last minute and the deal went south. And so it's a very tough profession in that way. Plus, remember, in most organizations, you, as a salesperson, you're the only one who is really on variable income. You could be on full commission, you could be on a large amount of commission or whatever. Everybody else, I'm not knocking accountants, but the people down in accounting are getting their salary, right? Maybe they get bonuses for doing a bit extra, but basically they have predictable income. Salesperson doesn't have predictable income. So I think it starts on how you start your day. And I think all too many people nowadays, and this isn't just for salespeople, start their day with negative inputs. And by what I mean by that is like wake up in the morning, start looking at news on your phone or social media. And that kind of stuff can get into your head. And news is there to provoke a reaction. It's not really there to inform you anymore. It doesn't matter where you sit on the political spectrum. Social media, comparison culture. You don't really want to start your day and see Corey standing beside the Lamborghini and I'm thinking, oh, hang on a second, Corey's doing fantastic and I'm feeling all inadequate. It turns out it wasn't even your Lamborghini, but I didn't bother reading the thing. So I think it's very important how you start your day and put yourself in the best frame of mind possible. And then as you head into your day, you have to let go of the experiences maybe you had the day before, the week before. All of those, maybe you had those, maybe that deal went south, maybe you've been having a lot of no's or whatever. Put those aside and say, I'm going to start fresh because I can't control whether you're ultimately going to sign the deal or not, but I can absolutely control how I'm going to show up for you and how prepared I'm going to be. And then actually the preparation piece itself, I think this is an interesting one. And this is something that it's not rookie salespeople, it's often experienced salespeople fall into the trap of that you've been doing it for so long. You think, I don't have to do so much prep. I've got this call coming up. I can wing this one. And then you wonder why your win rates are kind of going down and things aren't happening. And it often comes back to fundamentals. And that's why I think the best salespeople always pay attention to the fundamentals, do that prep work, set aside that time. And to be honest, now with AI and CRMs with ours and AI enabled, you have all the information easily at hand. So there is no excuse for you not to be doing that preparation, not to come to the call, well informed, not to be able to, show early on in the interaction that you are informed and prepared and you're not there to waste your time. So I think those things are how you start your day, how you choose to show up, doing the prep work, even when you feel like you don't need to do it. I was liken it to I do martial arts, Corey, and I was liken it to some days, we'll go in and our master will say, let's work on basic footwork. And you're like, I've been doing this, thousands and thousands and thousands of times before. But I guarantee you, he'll find something that you're not doing correctly because you've modified it or you've gotten a little lazy or whatever. And I feel it's the same. And I often mention the Kobe Bryant. Apparently, he used to be the first one in training 5 a.m. or something at the Lakers. And people assumed, he's working on trick shots and this. No, he was doing high school drills because he knew that to be the best, he had to have his fundamentals always perfect. And I think it's the same for the best salespeople. So they're not going to skip the preparation. They're not going to overlook how they're feeling, the kind of mood they're in, how they're going to show up, how they're presenting themselves. And then after that, it's all about then focusing on the other person and getting yourself into a space where you clear all the distractions away and you're actually able to be present and focus on the other person so you can actively listen. And I think that's one of the toughest things today is because we're all guilty of this, of saying, Corey, I'm the busiest I've ever been in my life. I'm so busy. But when we step back, I always say, though, are we really, or are we the most distracted we've ever been? And if we had one of those they used to do way back in the old days where they would have a time and motion study and they would have a guy with the clipboard standing behind people with the timer timing what you're doing and all this kind of stuff, If we had somebody doing that to us today, how much of our day would they discover was taken up by suddenly a notification popping up on our phone? Our sports team just signed a new player and we're like, and we think, it's only a minute, right? But a minute can cost you 20 to 30 minutes to refocus, right? And so I think that's the other thing is prioritizing, clearing your desk. You've got important calls coming. You don't need to know that your team signed a new player. You can find out about that later or whatever. So being very intentional and deliberate about how you start your day, how you execute it, how you prepare for something, and how you make sure that you are in the moment and present when you engage.
I definitely agree. And it's funny. It happened to me today and it happened to me in the flow of work. right? And it was, I went looking for a piece of information that I wasn't going to put together again because I knew I'd sent this email a week ago. I went in there and all of a sudden, 30 minutes later, I had answered 5 other emails and I thought to myself, how did I get here?
Yeah.
No
Yeah, and
clue.
it's so and we're all guilty of it, and it's so easy to do, and that's why one of the biggest misnomers is that idea of, do you have a minute, right? And you say, yeah, I have a minute, and I can give you a minute, but like I said, it can take me 20 minutes then to refocus on what I was doing because now I'm distracted. Maybe I end up, instead of going back to what I was doing, maybe I go and answer those other emails. So now that minute has actually cost me, 30, 40 minutes.
Right. Yeah, it definitely does take that while for that attention residue to kind of go away, to come back, to be able to focus on task. John, in listening to you talk, I love the approach that you put forward, and I'm sensing that you're a very disciplined person. Would you say that's true?
I would say I'm one of those kind of a mixture of being disciplined and being quite creative at the same time. So I have this duality, if you like, inner conflict.
Yeah, I get that. I guess what I'm pulling at here is, you mentioned so many good points on preparation. And then you also hit on the fact that something that doesn't get said enough, I don't think, is so much rejection. Right? You have to push all of that rejection out of your mind to show up fresh from the customer, to like cultivate an extreme amount of hope, even when you've done all of your homework, even when you're prepared, you have the business information, you have the financials in the back of your head, you know what you're going to talk about. And I'm curious because I can think of any other profession. Maybe you have sales, if you want to be a professional athlete, if you want to be a big actor in Hollywood, right? Or a writer or something like that. What other profession faces like rejection day in and day out? And I was looking on your LinkedIn earlier and I saw that you had a post featured about mental health and sales. Can you speak to how you see that kind of evolving these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think the attitudes around mental health, thankfully, are changing anyway. I think, thankfully, because, it's always kind of amazed me. But it's like if you walked into the office with a broken leg tomorrow, people would be like, "Oh, Corey, what happened?" And you'd be saying, "Oh, I had this snowboarding accident or whatever. I broke my leg." Right? And everybody would be sympathetic. If you walked in and said, "Oh, where have you been for the last few days?" And you'd say, "Oh, well, I had to, I've been having some depression issues, or I've been having some anxiety or mental health issues." Now people look at you a little differently and they either think, oh, Corey's not the person I thought he was, or he's maybe a little weak. And they may actually start to think you're a little weak. Now, when you come in a broken leg, we don't go, well, Corey must have really weak legs or weak bones. What's up with him? But we have that different attitude. Instead of just looking at it as it's just another form of, mind and body is connected, and mental health issues are just like physical health issues. They are things that happen to people. They don't ask for them to happen, and they can be dealt with. I think in sales, you have to be careful because, as you said, you get this amount of rejection, you get these horrible surprises. Like I would tell you, I once went, my wife today, she was originally a salesperson when I met her, and I actually went to a sales call with her back in the day. She worked at the same company, and she was going to literally been working on this for 6 months and about like 7 or 8 different meetings, was ready to sign a $2.5 million deal. And we got into the office and the guy came in and said, "I just got fired." Right. So that was,
wow.
You imagine that $2.5 billion deal out the window, terrible for him and everything. And so you have to deal with moments like this that are just out of left field, that don't happen in other jobs. So I think you have to take additional care of yourself, and you have to find ways of dealing with that. And one guy I interviewed some years ago, he had an interesting approach where he said, what I do is I set myself rewards. He goes, if I say, okay, if I'm going to prospect today and if I arrange 3 good meetings, then I'm going to reward myself with a movie tonight. However, if I don't, but I have done everything possibly I could have done that day, like I've done all the activities, I've tried everything, then I'll give myself a lesser reward, maybe ice cream on the way home or something. And I just thought it was an interesting concept because in sales, we tend to be absolutists, right? You either get the sale or you don't. And we tend to overlook all the other things that we're doing that accumulatively, get you there. And I think sometimes that's what you've got to do. You've got to say, am I doing all the right things? Am I paying attention to all of the fundamentals? Am I working, as efficiently and as hard as I can? And if that's the case, then the results will come eventually. And maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe maybe it takes a few weeks or whatever. But as long as you can say, I'm doing all of the right things, then it will come together. And pat yourself on the back for doing the right things and try and stay positive in that form. And I think also having maybe a mentor, I think is a really good thing to have. So if you're a salesperson, maybe having a more experienced salesperson, somebody's been around the block 1,000 times, asking them, would you be a mentor to me? And, can I just talk with you every so often and chat and discuss? And I think having somebody like that who can sort of remind you, or tell you, I had periods like that, but here's what I did. And I definitely think you have to take care of yourself, and maybe when you're in sales, maybe at a higher level than you might in other roles, because you are faced with such uncertainty and negativity. And like I said, your unpredictable income, all of those things. So I would absolutely recommend that you get a mentor. I'd recommend that you pay attention to how you're feeling, and then not to be afraid, if things are getting on top of you and you're not feeling great mentally, reach out to a medical professional, reach out to a therapist, take time off if you need to take time off, do whatever it is, but don't stuff it all away or just suffer through it, because we don't need to suffer through things like this. Like, life's hard enough as it is without, just suffering through things. So I would encourage people to pay attention to how you feel, and also make sure you have time for yourself too, because this is the other thing, Corey, and this goes for everybody, not just salespeople. We live in this culture where you're bombarded all the time, and you see like people don't spend any time just relaxing, clearing their minds, thinking. They're always on the phone, doom scrolling or head down. It's like, sometimes I think you just need to lift your head up and just smell the roses if you like, but just take a little time, put your device away, check in with yourself, make sure and figure out, how are you really feeling, and just let your mind clear for a little bit. Because like I said, life's tough enough as it is, and sales is tough enough as it is. And like I said, now, not just do you get rejection, but you get this ghosting that has crept into our culture now, where people don't even feel the need to give you an answer anymore. I always think it's unfortunate. I mean, all you need to say is no. Just reply, no, unfortunately, I'm not going to move forward. But when you've had a salesperson make all of this investment of time and energy and stuff, and then you don't have the manners or the politeness to just say no, I think that's additionally hard.
Yeah, it really is. And I loved your tactical advice, right? To kind of cultivate that resiliency when you were talking about the idea of giving yourself small rewards, or even giving yourself maybe a little bit of a less reward when things don't work out. Because I like to think of it in the way that you can send every email in the world. It can be the perfect sales email. The one thing you cannot control is timing.
Exactly.
So that is so important.
That is absolutely, Corey. The hardest thing is that you can send the greatest email, you can send the greatest offer, you can have everything lined up, but it just doesn't sync with that person at that moment in time. And that's just tough. That's just part of the game, and it's really tough. So that's what I'm saying. Sometimes you have to just ask yourself, have I done everything I could possibly do? Have I done all the right things? And okay, it hasn't resulted in I haven't got the outcome I want right now, but if I'm consistent, it'll come.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of complicate this issue further in a way, I think there's a lot of pressure these days to put more of ourselves out there. Yes. Particularly in sales. I mean, I've said it a lot that salespeople end up being a huge differentiator for their own companies, right? Because they are effectively the face of the company. They're the one that prospects are building relationships with. So that's great. And it also, from a leadership perspective, it can make you a little bit nervous, right? It's like, wait, do I want all that authenticity out there? Do I even want my authenticity out there? So how do you find that balance between being the professional face of a company and also being yourself and being memorable and connecting on a human level?
I think being authentic is very important, but I also think that unfortunately, authenticity, because it's become a bit of a buzzword too. I always say when they do, buzzwords like that, authenticity and vulnerability and all of that, because then people think it's something like, I can train you to be more authentic. Well, no, you can't. That's ridiculous. And just be more vulnerable. What does that mean? Just share everything. No, that's not it either. It's ridiculous. So I think at the end of the day is, I think people want to trust that people are who they say they are. So I think you should be yourself and not put on a persona. So, I mean, as long as yourself is a good person. If it's not, then you maybe go work on yourself first before you start doing that. But I would say, my compatriot Oscar Wilde said, like, be yourself because everyone else is taken. And I think that is actually very profound advice. So I think be yourself and be authentic. But that doesn't mean, again, it doesn't mean that you have to put everything out there about yourself. You can be selective in what you share, enough to allow you to express your personality in a productive way. And I think, as you said, I think there's a lot of pressure today. So I think one of the things that you need to be careful of is, what is your online presence? Search yourself, do a Google or an AI search on yourself, see what's out there about you, and ask yourself, if somebody was to look at the totality of this, is this who I really want to come across as, right? Because I think, again, going back to this idea of consistency, I think people want to, in sales, prospects, customers, they want to trust that you are who you say you are. So therefore, if you're a bit of a chameleon, if I see you when we're interacting, like this in a professional setting, and then I do a search on you and I see a completely different character out there, and immediately that's going to be a red flag for me. I'm going to say, well, who's the real Corey here? So I would say, be selective in what you put out there, and you don't have to have everything out there. And maybe and like I said, unfortunately the lines between private and personal and professional have been blurred so much that, again, you have to ask yourself, do I need to be as out there on some areas as maybe I am? Maybe I need to pull back. Maybe I need to make more things private, because we want to put our best foot forward anyway. But I think at the end of the day, Corey, what authenticity means is that I approach you with the intention that I want to help you. And I genuinely want to help you. So that's the first piece of authenticity, is that I'm not just here to try and take your money. I actually want to solve a problem. And I know that if I solve your problem, the money will come, the sale will come. The second part is to be consistent. Like I said, it's like, if I say I'm going to do something, do it, right? And if I say I'm going to do it on Tuesday, do it on Tuesday, not on Wednesday. Don't be a chameleon. We've all had awful experiences with salespeople who've been our best friend when they're selling to us. And then when we call them when there's an issue later, they just fob you off to customer service without even a reply. So don't be a chameleon and let your personality come through. It's like, the other thing is too, if you're an introvert and maybe a highly analytical person, be a highly analytical person, be that person, because some people want that. They want that, highly analytical. You're more of a 30,000 foot person. Be that person, own it. And if you need to go deeper, maybe you need to bring somebody else into the conversation, but just don't try to be what you're not. And I think that's the key to authenticity. As I said, I don't think it's sharing everything. And this vulnerability thing, I think, has also gotten a little bit like overused, and people think vulnerability means like I have to share my deepest, darkest thought, feelings and all of that. Like, who really wants that at the end of the day? I think vulnerability, they just want to understand that they're dealing with another human being, right? And that in every interaction, especially in B2B sales, right? In every interaction, there's a certain amount of personal emotion involved, because maybe I'm selling to you. Maybe you're part of a committee, but maybe you're the key person responsible for this. So whatever decision you make at the end of the day, you're going to have to own that decision. And if it's a good decision and things work out, maybe that enhances your career. If it doesn't work out, maybe it's a bit career limiting for the future. So there's a lot of personal investment. And I think that's where the authenticity comes in, is in recognizing that you have this personal, I'm not just selling to you as part of a company, I'm also selling to you as an individual, knowing that you have a personal investment and stake in this as well. And for myself also, just being honest too, I mean, being real is, yes, I'm selling on behalf of my company, but obviously I have a vested interest in in this working out. But if we're all honest and we're trying to have the best outcome for both of us, and we're not just on this thing about, I want to squeeze a few extra dollars out of you, or you want to force the price down even more. If we can just be honest and sort of say, let's come to an agreement where both of us feel like maybe we had to give up a little bit here or there, but we feel like we got a fair deal. And so I think fairness is far more important than being overly vulnerable or overly sharing. And I think, unfortunately, those things have turned into buzzwords and have been misinterpreted a little bit.
And I think you hit on personal value, and I think it's one of the most overlooked things in sales, right? Like, yes, we're selling business to business. I might be part of a buying group of 20 people. I might work at a big corporation, and yet, I'm not bringing on XYZ solution just for the solution. It might help me leave the office every day at 6. And it might shore up that next promotion, give me some leadership visibility. So there's always that personal angle to consider. Okay, as we move toward the end of the podcast, there are 2 questions that we ask every guest, John. And the first one is, we're recording this in March of 2025. Fast forward to 2030. What's a big change that's coming for us that not many people see right now?
2030 is that's a big gap. I would say, obviously, with the advent of AI, that AI is going to do a lot of things. But I think if we're talking about sales, I think you need to start looking at upskilling yourself, and you really need to start focusing on being that creative relationship building element, the thing that so far, maybe by 2030 you can do it, but right now AI can't do that. AI is a fantastic support tool that can give you lots of insights and information, which allows you then, if you want, is to be that creative person, that creative problem solver, that relationship builder. So I think the most successful salespeople are the ones who look on this as a fantastic opportunity to get rid of all of that other stuff and to focus on being more creative, more entrepreneurial, and more relational in how you interact with customers and prospects. Because I think the rest of the AI is going to take away a lot of the rest of the stuff, and therefore you have the choice. You can either go upstream and upskill yourself, or if you want to stay in the middle or lower tier, you're probably going to get taken out.
Fantastic advice. Okay, final question. You could go back in time 5, 10, maybe even 15 years. What advice would you give to your younger self?
The one piece of advice I would give is to work on self-awareness. Self-awareness, I think, is the greatest gift that you can give yourself. It is the greatest limitation to your career progression, to your life progression. And it's something that we tend to come to much later in life. So if I have advice for my younger self, if I have advice for younger people out there, I would say is self-awareness. Start to really understand how you interact with the world, how you operate, and take ownership of that, because it'll make such a big difference. I've probably missed out on opportunities in the past through lack of self-awareness. I've seen people who have spent a long time trying to become things that they were never suited for because they weren't self-aware and didn't realize that that was not their strength or their forte. So I would say absolutely 100% self-awareness.
All right. Well, thank you, John. This has been a fascinating episode. If people want to learn more about you, more about Pipeliner CRM, where should they go?
Yeah, so pipelinersales.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can also find me on SalesPop YouTube channel or salespop.net.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Corey, and thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.